Revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. One decision, one word, and suddenly, an empire crumbles. For Caitlin Clark, revenge wasn't about firing shots on social media or snapping back in interviews. Her revenge was devastatingly simple. She said no. No to Geno Auriemma. No to UConn's legacy. No to the $1 million offer that came crawling back to her years later. On paper, it looked absurd. Who walks away from over $1 million for just 8 weeks of basketball? But this wasn't just a contract. It was the lifeline of a man who once dismissed her, belittled her, and treated her like an afterthought. When Clark rejected it, she didn't just pass on a paycheck. She humbled the man who never thought he could be humbled. And that's what makes this story bigger than basketball. It isn't just about points, assists, or trophies. It's about power. For decades, Geno Auriemma was the gatekeeper of women's basketball. The coach who decided who mattered, who got the spotlight, and who faded into obscurity. But Caitlin Clark flipped that script. She didn't need his approval, his program, or his checkbook. She built her empire without him. And when he finally reached out, she turned him away with the kind of quiet authority that says, I don't need you. You need me. Every revenge story starts with a mistake. Geno's wasn't a blown play or a bad timeout. It was arrogance, pure, blinding arrogance. Before Clark became the face of the sport, before the sold-out arenas and record-shattering TV ratings, she was just a kid with a dream. She admitted it openly. UConn was the coolest place on earth. The dynasty, the empire, the home of Taurasi, Moore, Stewart, the mountaintop of women's basketball. For a girl growing up in Iowa, there was nothing bigger. And when recruitment time came, the path seemed obvious. The most electrifying talent of her generation pairing with the greatest recruiter the game had ever known. But the call never came. Geno never picked up the phone, never called Clark, never called her parents, barely even sent a message through her AAU coach. For the greatest recruiter of all time, that silence was deafening. And it wasn't an oversight. It was a choice. The message was clear. She wasn't their priority. His excuse? UConn had already locked in Paige Beckers, and he didn't want 2-point guards. On the surface, fine. But then came the insult. Geno suggested that if Clark really wanted UConn, she should have called him. Think about that. The coach who built his legacy on spotting once-in-a-generation talent years before anyone else decided Caitlin Clark wasn't worth the effort, then blamed a teenager for not chasing him. That wasn't just a recruiting miss. It was disrespect, the kind you don't forget. And in return, Clark quietly filed it away. If Geno didn't believe in her, she'd go somewhere. That did. So she chose Iowa, a program without UConn's banners, mystique, or dynasty glow. To many, it looked like a consolation prize. But for Clark, it was liberation. At Iowa, she wasn't Paige's shadow. She wasn't Geno's afterthought. She was the recruit, the one who would carry the program. And from the second she laced up in Iowa City, she rewrote the script. Her logo threes weren't just shots. They were statements. Her sold-out arenas weren't just crowds. They were proof. Her record-shattering TV ratings weren't flukes. They were receipts. Every basket, every viral highlight, every broken record was a reminder. You missed this. Meanwhile, Geno doubled down. Instead of humility, he leaned on arrogance. He brushed her off with condescending soundbites, calling her a kid playing like she's in the driveway. Instead of acknowledging her as a generational force, he tried to shrink her brilliance into something ordinary. But ordinary doesn't sell out Madison Square Garden. Ordinary doesn't drag the WNBA into mainstream relevance. Ordinary doesn't cost you millions, and that's where the irony bites deepest. Geno closed the door when Caitlin Clark knocked. He thought she'd fade into just another good player. Instead, she built the biggest empire women's basketball has ever seen without him. And when he finally circled back, contract in hand, Clark didn't rage. She didn't gloat. She simply said no. And that one word cost him more than a championship loss ever could. Geno Auriemma just couldn't help himself. Anytime Caitlin Clark's name came up, he found a way to drag her back into Paige Beckers comparisons. If Clark was fearless, well, Paige was too. If Clark was connecting with fans, so had Paige. It wasn't random. It was strategy. By tethering Clark's rise to his chosen players, Geno kept himself in the spotlight. He wanted the world to believe her success was nothing new, nothing SE,